Hello, everyone. Welcome to an exciting episode of our podcast, The Future of Low-Code Platforms, Emerging Technologies and Business Strategy. I'm Runki Goswami, the Global Marketing Head at Newgen. And today we're going to talk about this exciting topic, which is low-code, and a lot of the discussions will also be about AI, Gen AI, and several other things which is impacting the space and how dynamic and how evolving it is in the overall picture. Well, today enterprises are betting big on low-code platforms to drive the digital transformation efforts. Why? Because low-code democratizes app development, enabling people without deep technical expertise to build powerful, user-friendly applications, while also enhancing the productivity of seasoned developers. Well, in short, it's all about accelerating innovation and simplifying work. So, well, as I was saying, this is just the tip of the iceberg. With AI and Gen AI stepping into the picture, the low-code landscape is evolving at a breakneck speed. So, let's explore this fascinating intersection, and I'm thrilled to be joined by two leading industry experts, John Bratincevic. He is the principal analyst at Forrester, a thought leader in the low-code space, citizen development, digital process automation, and of course, you help us understand the impact of AI and software development. So, welcome, John.
Thank you.
And Varun, well, you're the head of product at Newgen. You drive cutting-edge innovation in enterprise digital transformation, and a warm welcome to you as well.
Thank you, Runki.
Well, then let's dive in. But let me tell all our listeners and viewers that I've got a set of questions over here, and the questions have popped in from so many employees at Newgen, the communities we serve, a lot of people that we interact with. So a set of questions. So let's dive in, John. So John, you've been at the forefront of analyzing the low-code space for years, guiding its transformative journey across industries. How do you see the space evolving, and where do you think it's heading next?
Well, a few years ago, low-code was one technology you could use in a portfolio of technologies for delivering software. Now it's so mainstream, it's becoming the dominant pattern, practically. If you look at the data among professional developers, and we survey the professional developer community globally every year, 93% of professional developers use low-code for at least a portion of their work, and 51% use it for the majority. So 51 to 100%. So the majority use it for the majority. So very, very mainstream, and it's becoming central to the sort of development strategy and the technology strategy of many firms. At the same time, citizen development, which you referred to, so people outside of IT developing apps, business people adding technology chops, is also mainstream. Something like 83% of firms, depending on what level of leader you survey, they're either working on or have an active citizen developer strategy to allow people outside of IT to build apps and provide those platforms, low-code platforms typically. So both those things are hot and heavy. And at the same time, now with AI coming into the picture, what low-code platforms are doing is they're incorporating AI along every step of the life cycle. Because part of the philosophy of the tools is they span the life cycle in addition to providing the abstractions for development, which means you have different points to put AI and then have agents work with those different tools and points in the SDLC and so on. And that's leading to a new category we're calling application generation. Also, if you look at the data on the use cases, AI use cases being the hot thing in technology, the number one use case for low-code platforms now is in fact AI-infused applications. So things like what's being called agents. So very mainstream, very big, most professional developers, democratization's blowing up, and lots of AI stuff. That's basically the state of today.
Interesting. Varun, you need to step in here. Give us a little bit of insight as to how you've been dealing a lot with low-code, and that in Newgen, we are in the low-code space. So any insights on the evolution that's happening?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the adoption of low-code has increased manifold. As John rightly mentioned, almost 91% of developers use low-code platforms in one way or the other. And what we have seen is the kind of applications that they're able to build Low-code actually helps them reduce the application development time by up to 90%, and that's huge, right? And what we've seen our customers do is phenomenal. We have large banks who have been able to automate hundreds of processes across HR, across legal, across accounting, across operations. And they have been able to really harness the power of low-code to automate applications across their organization. That's a huge benefit that they get out of it. Also, with AI coming in, I think we are looking at a reduced development time even further. And we are also looking at a lot of runtime decisioning being either done by AI agents or at least being helped by AI agents as we go forward.
Interesting. And this reduced time to speed that you mentioned is like what? From hours to minutes to what is it like? Days to hours to minutes, something like that maybe. Yeah.
A typical application, if it's a small departmental application, used to take around a week, couple of weeks to build. Now we are talking about agents like Newgen and Marvin being able to build that entire application in a matter of minutes. Right, and then you just test it, and in a few hours you're ready with your application.
And if you were using code, it would take months to build, right? So you're down from months to weeks to minutes to at least try something out.
Absolutely.
You actually alluded to something or implied something in your response. These, depending on the product, of course, these aren't just like one niche of pattern or use case, right? Because the low-code platforms that people think of, the ones we cover at Forrester, they're actually bundles of components that straddle many use cases, right? They give you a stack of stuff that fit what makes up the majority of business applications. So when you have an opinionated stack and all the other enhancements you're describing, you can do a lot of damage.
Absolutely.
Across a lot of use cases.
True, yeah. Yep. Now, if I have to place this question in the context of citizen developers, so how do you see emerging technologies? Of course, like AI shaping or impacting low code, or if you understand what I'm trying to say, in the context of citizen development, that is. Because earlier we just spoke about the overall industry, how low-code is evolving. Now, if you have to just narrow it down to citizen development.
So citizen development was already happening and would have and will continue to happen. But with AI coming onto the scene, it's just going a lot faster. That's the way to think of it. A lot more people think of it as much more credible than it was before. Especially when, in the design time in a low-code platform, you can prompt an application into existence. So it's one thing to provide visual abstractions so a non-coder can develop things. Great. There's still a learning curve depending on the product. When you can ask for something and have the platform configure it in front of you and smooth that learning curve and learn how the patterns could be put together, etc., I mean, that's much more democratizing still. And as a direct result of that, we've spoken with firms where, maybe they're at 2 or 3% of their workforce is developing apps, right? And they plan to quadruple that in the next year or two as they use AI to bring more people into the fold and so on. So that's one thing. The other side of it is, there's just a general recognition that with AI doing steps across the different portions of the life cycle, that the discrete separation of roles isn't as necessary, okay? And that factors into the citizen development thing very much, because the ideal for any business problem is to have the person closest to the problem solve it. And now, when the platform can infer or automate certain things around design, or certain things around testing, or certain things around DevOps or whatever, and compress what those steps and roles are, that opens up the aperture to a lot more citizen development, as well as collaboration with IT, right? Fusion teams and not having all these discrete roles required for every project and that kind of thing. So there's just a compression of the talent needed, as well as greater democratization, all kind of lumped together, right? You're getting closer to that magic bending of the bits and bytes to your will when you got a place where you can prompt something into existence and look at it. Like, it's a very different mindset.
Brilliant. Wow.
Absolutely. And just to add to your point, I think it's not just the artifacts that are being generated into existence. Yeah. It's also, think of a business developer. They know how they are doing work, so they can build an application around that. But now, if they have the power of the industry best practices, they have the power of, am I capturing the right data? Am I capturing the right content in this application? Now, suddenly, their knowledge, their ability to develop applications has increased manifold. So they can in fact get things first time right. They have to do lesser iterations to get the perfect application.
And here's the really cool thing about that, which I just realized last year, and it seems so obvious in hindsight, but I had this epiphany. It's one thing to automate technical steps, right? Like you ask it to code something or develop something and it does it for you. Mm-hmm. Now, when you're using these large language models, there's at least general knowledge on many portions of business baked into it, right? So you can ask for a CRM for your particular industry, and it can take a crack at it and at least get you past that blank canvas stage.
Absolutely.
And the reality is, that's all most buyers actually want, is something.
Absolutely.
So that merging of domain knowledge with the technical act completely changes the algebra of how you get to a solution.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's
Like,
the power of
Even if there's some hallucination, you still inspect it.
Yes.
And if it's not something that you're going to go to jail for,
True.
it's a big step forward.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, there are so many terminologies we've been a part of, right? Of course, AI, Gen AI, Agentic AI. This is a new term. Well, I wouldn't say it's a new term, but then it's become very, very prominent now. People are talking about it. We read a lot about it. We are in that space. So a little bit of an insight as to, or maybe an explanation as to what it is exactly, and how is it reshaping the low-code landscape. And if I have to narrow it down, maybe it's too many questions in one, but then reshaping the low-code landscape around the design time in SDLC and runtime maybe. And do you see it more of a disruptor or something that complements these platforms?
Well, you talked about design time and runtime, and that's very, very important. We have to distinguish that when we're talking about AI. Because when you talk about development platforms, there's AI to help the development process and those steps, and there's AI in the things you make, right? So it's very important to separate those topics out. So I'll focus on design time first. So actually, no. Let me take a step back. You asked about agentic AI. I have to say something about agentic AI. So all agentic AI means, basically, if you look at vendor marketing, is AI that does something. So instead of generating text or generating a picture, now it's hitting endpoints or tools is the industry term to do something more, right? So it's doing like what a person would do, navigating a system or performing some calculation or routing something a certain way, all right? That lens then can apply to either, in low code, design time for development, because there can be agents doing development, or agents for runtime, like an agent that routes an insurance claim a certain way. So let's talk about design time, because that's, I think, the more important thing, at least this part of the conversation. So in design time, basically, we talked about AI being used across the various steps of the life cycle. So as I alluded to, low-code platforms, by definition, the way we've covered them over the years, straddle the different steps, right? So they have the development tools for making the app, they have deployment tools, they have testing tools, sometimes they have agile planning tools that flow into the development environment, they have administration and governance tools, etc. And all those things can be connected to a certain degree and have certain things generated using AI. For example, in the authoring step, not only can you ask for a CRM for your industry and get some crack at it, you can also generate the functional tests or even the unit tests for the actual programming at the exact same time. So that starts blurring the different steps of the life cycle. You could call that an agent, because you're asking it to do something and it's doing it. So when you hear agentic in the development world, in kind of the design time world, all that means is AI doing something. And in the low code space, AI is being applied to all those steps. There's another very important point. We coined a term called application generation platforms, which basically it means platforms that straddle all those steps and provide a modeling language, right? Like low code, where you can look at it visually, to generate applications. Because if you go out into the AI-assisted development world, what you find is there's all sorts of super cool, like awesome stuff happening, but it's generally in isolated development tools, right? There's a design tool, and that's doing stuff with AI, and there's a coding tool, and that's doing stuff with AI, and there's a testing tool, and that's doing stuff with AI. And the reality is, to take full advantage of AI, you have to integrate those things into a platform for the AI to do things across them. And you could call that agents. That's what allows you to compress the different steps. Also, to generate more than code snippets in the actual authoring part, the part where you write the actual software, you need that abstraction, you need that modeling language. You need something at a higher level that refers to existing software components to really get the crazy velocity. Otherwise, you're restricted permanently to generating snippets and looking at it, which to me is a very limited point of view on what you can do with AI and software development. So that's a long way of saying agents just mean AI doing something. Be sure to separate out design time from runtime. And design time, low-code platforms are straddling all those steps and using their model to generate big chunks of functionality. And the net of it is, it's more than a complement to low-code. It actually represents, I think, what a lot of software development will look like, because that's obviously where software development will trend. Why would we keep having these bleeding chunks of tools and keep trying to put them together and make it work? We want that highly integrated approach to it. And the current prediction and point of view from Forrester is that much of software development will effectively low codify. If you look at software development 5 years down the road, it's all going to look like low code with AI in it. That's basically where this is going.
Interesting.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's a great question, Runki, because there are so many terminologies now: large language models, AI, generative AI, right? And so I'll just kind of take a step back, because when we look at any new technology, we don't just look at what the technology does, right? We kind of go deeper. We look at what fundamentally is the capability of that technology, and how that technology can help us solve business problems, right? That's where the rubber meets the road. Because if you can solve business needs using any new technology, that's awesome, right? So when we looked at generative AI agents, Agentic AI, what we found was that there is so much knowledge stored within these models. Plus, already customers have so much data, so much content stored in their repositories. So what if we could kind of combine all of these and use them for both the design time and the runtime? And at design time, like I mentioned, our Marvin can help build all the artifacts with its interfaces. Even something as simple as what is the regular expression that I should use to validate this field is something that generative AI can do for you, right? So that's the power that we bring at the design time. Plus, also at the runtime, when there are people working within the application, if they need any help. So, for example, we've recently started this implementation at a large regulatory body, where their regulations department gets a new application. And when they look at the application, they want to see what were the similar applications in the past, what was the decision that I had taken, plus also look at their standard operating procedure, and then come out with some helpful hints as to, this is what happened in the past, this you might do this, or these things look proper, but this step of your SOP is missing, and then help guide the end user to take a decision. I think that's really, really powerful.
Let me ask you this. Can you imagine having to do all that? Because so many people miss that to use AI effectively for anything, but in this case for development, you have to point it to your data and point it to your policies and try to incorporate all that. Yeah. Can you imagine having to do all that and assemble a platform from pieces and make the AI work across all those and put it all together? Like, that's that would be an absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
Right? That's another argument for the idea of an integrated, opinionated platform with the modeling language, with the components.
Absolutely.
That then you apply your context, and then you do all that sort of contextual grounding and stuff too.
Correct.
That's
correct.
my viewpoint.
So absolutely. I think low-code platform forms the backbone. That low-code platform is what is tying all of this together. And you can now build applications using AI. You can now build applications which have AI infused within them, which can help you in decisioning. So all of this is possible only because of this layer, the low-code layer.
Yep. Agreed.
Yeah.
On this point, Varun, I need to understand the real-world problems across industries that probably we are trying to solve. When I say we, I mean Newgen, and any key needs of clients that Newgen is addressing.
Okay, great question. I think the customers always have two needs. How can I get my application built faster? Right, from bespoke development we talked about, right? Months to weeks, and now to days. How can I automate my processes faster? And second, how can I reduce my operations time, right? Operational efficiency has always been one of the biggest driving factors behind automation. So instead of processing a loan application in 3 days, can I do it in 1 day, right? That's where the business efficiency comes in. So I think when we looked at this platform, we looked at, okay, there's this platform which has all of these different artifacts. Now within each artifact, how can I help build this artifact faster? Plus, when I go into the decisioning phase, I already have a lot of data in my system. How can I build models? Then take the data from these models into an agentic framework and build agents which can then probably not autonomously so much, but at least help end users take decisions much faster, right? So I think that's a point of convergence where we currently are at.
Okay, and you're probably talking to quite a few maybe vendors, and I say vendors maybe, and clients from the BFSI world or others, because you keep on talking to such folks. And anything that you can talk about the real world problems which we are trying to solve, any particular needs of clients which have got addressed with the application of an agentic workforce?
Well, the most common problem, we're jumping ahead here, the most common problem I get asked about is governance. Because in this new world of being able to develop things so easily in a democratized way, IT orgs are now in the business of trying to pragmatically manage risk and figure out where to draw the lines. And I can go deep into that if you'd like now or later. In terms of actual use cases, the one observation I've had is I don't even think most corporations have quite wrapped their heads around what AI can do yet, right? Because if you look at, like, if you go through a brainstorming activity with them, for example, often the kinds of use cases they'll generate are very like RPA style use cases, kind of like those clicks and keystrokes, what would normally be done client side kind of things. And AI can help with that, obviously, because that can make the client side automation more effective and less fragile and all that. And now you've seen some of these things that have come out recently where you can talk to it and it'll go do it in a browser or whatever. But that's not really a sustainable technology foundation. That's like interesting, right? So most people aren't even at the point where they can envision it very practically. The advice I'm giving, this is a little different than what problems are coming with. The big problem is governance. The advice I'm giving is, well, there is immense value in LLMs, even if we stopped all research right now. Even if we just froze it all right now, the LLMs will, all their pros and cons as they exist, just stopped. And it will take years for us to figure out all the different ways to derive value from them, to wrap software around them in different ways. So the most practical way to do that, and we've got some amazing examples in our research recently, is to enable the domain people to deliver those solutions for a couple of reasons. One is you need to run hundreds or thousands of experiments with AI to get the ROI. Most companies agree they haven't gotten like a big ROI out of their AI experiments yet, right? That's because they can't run enough of them and find dogs that hunt, right? They need to run hundreds or thousands of experiments with all the ideas out there. Secondly, you need to use the domain people to do that because one, that gives you the scale, and two, they're the only ones that can work with the models directly effectively, right? It's not an engineer's skill set to get the LLM to sing and dance the way you want, right? It's like prompt engineering and lightweight grounding is a lot of the work, and that's a domain problem, not a technical problem. And third, it has to take the form of software solutions, right? That's why you need these platforms, because it's not going to be, oh, it generates text or it generates a PowerPoint or something like that. That's just a nice little task thing to have. It has to take the form of process solutions or apps with AI inside them that make decisions or surface things automatically at the right time and so on. So in general, the strategy I'm recommending is use a low-code platform and decentralize and democratize mass experimentation, and that's how you'll get the money back out of this thing, because the value is there. It's just you got to set the mechanism to get to it.
Absolutely. Mass adoption is the key, I think. Very well put.
Right, yeah. In fact, a couple of days or maybe weeks, at least a week back when we were talking, John, and we were talking to understand more about what low-code is doing around AI or agentic AI. One of the points that you'd mentioned is there's a huge value in AI, but we still have to unlock it because we have to wrap software around it in a million different ways.
Yes.
That was a very interesting statement.
This legal firm I interviewed, there was an example where they basically made kind of an expert system kind of application using AI, basically doing private equity contract assessments, right? So all the complex reasoning a lawyer would do, and this was done by a non-engineer, okay? The non-engineer kind of figure out how a lawyer reasons through these contracts and use not even like really deep AI tools, right? It was really sort of like using the logic component of the low-code platform in the database to sort of, systematize the way a lawyer would go through the questions and then hitting the model at every one of the questions and routing different ways. So they effectively automated private equity contract examinations. And that same company, they actually made a SaaS app that they're now selling to the legal market for kind of a niche purpose, where it's basically a database of a very specific area of law that's like spread across the country in local municipality websites. So they scrape the websites using AI to feed the database that makes the SaaS app that they then sell to the market. Another one was it's all sorts of patterns, but they're all very, very like domain person patterns that you would never get to, sitting on the AI team thinking about it, right? Like it has to be like the lawyers and the accountants and the HR people that come up with the ideas and work with the models to make them work. And then, I think the citizen development, sort of app execution model speaks for itself. Like that's what you got to do. I could go on. I've probably got a dozen in my head, but those are good ones. Actually, another good one was movie theater tickets. A movie theater chain, they do movie theater refunds with an agent, essentially. You send your email and say, hey, I want my money back because my popcorn had a rat in it or something, you know. And then there's a policy that the person has to look at, and they have to research the customer and make a judgment as to whether to apply the refund. So the agent does that and drafts an email. And right now the company has a person read the email before it goes out, but I mean, you know, they're just going to turn that off. So then it'll be autonomous, essentially.
Right. Interesting.
So there's a bunch, but the point is they have all these different patterns, and it's all intrinsically tied. You need those domain people coming up with it and messing with it to get it done.
Very interesting. Awesome. In fact, Varun, of course, Newgen has seen some big wins here, whether it's large financial institution or insurance and all. And one of the coffee breaks that we were having, and when I was talking to you, you were doing a lot of interesting talk around Marvin, Lumen, Harper, and you were citing industry cases. Can you take me back to that discussion maybe and help our viewers or listeners understand what we are saying?
Sure, absolutely. I think just for context, there have been a few recent wins which have been around the Agentic AI and the generative AI space. And I was talking about the use cases where customers are, they already have a lot of data in their repository. But mostly that repository is like, it's just, you've put a lot of information there and now you're not actively using that repository. It's just there for maybe some audit purpose or something. And the ask specifically is, how can I use my past data to kind of automate a lot of future applications, right? And I was talking about the large regulatory body. There's another government entity that we signed up in Singapore, where they have this repository, and what they want essentially is, whenever a new application comes in, can somebody look at that past data and can I question or query the repository, right? Then we have another example where the credit decisioning that needs to happen. So there's an underwriter who's sitting at his work desk, which is again an application built on a low-code platform. But then they've got these credit decisioning models that are working at the back end. But traditionally they used to just give a confidence score, right? So if they say that, okay, this application has a confidence score of 0.65, you really don't know what to make out of it, right? But the power that we were able to build over there is feed the output of this model and the data source into a large language model, and then start asking questions on that model, right? So that's where the underwriter can now go dig deeper. Why is this 0.65? If I add another collateral, what would be the updated score be like? Or why did you take this decision? Why did you, say that, okay, this should be accepted? So the whole auditability or explainability of that model has come out just because we are able to use LLMs in between. So that's a beautiful use case that we did. I think beyond that, the application generation is one, crazy area, like I said, from months to weeks to days. And we are now looking at, from what you rightly said, that if the business person is not there, right, you'll have to go into multiple cycles. So the traditional way of software development, where a business analyst takes requirements from business, gives it to a software developer, they develop something, then go back to the UAT phase, where typically the business user says, okay, this is not what I asked for. And then you again go back into that, say, that's gone. So we have fusion teams where you have developers and business users sitting together, brainstorming, building applications. And we have been able to, kind of help them build these applications much faster.
Nice. That actually gives me a segue into my next question, and it's for both of you. So with the rise of low-code platform, is there still room for software developers in the industry, and what should they look forward to?
Well, I think in the typical enterprise, the old idea that developers make apps and other people consume them is basically dead. Not everyone has realized it, but that's basically dead. Much of business software is the same fungible technical things rearranged into different patterns. Low code already made it much easier for the domain people to do it, and now you can generate things. So the idea that you need a developer to make an app is not a very pragmatic approach. The way they should look at themselves, they can go in one of two directions. If I'm a developer and I'm looking out there, you can go in one of two directions. You either go deeper into technology, right? Inside a typical enterprise, not a software company, that would be like being essentially on their platform team, or, that works either on the most complex projects or actually provides the underlying services and integrations or helps people when they need it, when they need something technical or whatever. So you go more purely into technology and you get deeper. You don't just stay where you're at, because we're not going to use you to write the app anymore. That's a lot easier to do. Or and obviously, you could also work at a technology company and work on underlying technology. That's another path. Or you go the other direction, you become much more multidisciplinary. So this has been observed in the technology world already. This isn't theory at all. I saw even recently a product leader at a tech company talked about the collapse of the talent stack in their own company, where the designers are coding and the coders are doing design and they're deploying, and it's because AI can generate stuff, right? So, and that's been going on in low code for a while, but now AI is just like gasoline on top. So what that basically means is, if you saw yourself as, I'm a Java specialist, and yeah, maybe I do a few other things, but that's really my core value proposition in life, that shouldn't be your core value proposition. Your core value proposition should be to learn the other parts of software and solution delivery and combine them so you can solve problems and provide value. The consultative developer, if you will. And those people could come from business or IT, but if you're a technologist, again, either get way deeper in the technology as a true engineer working on underlying systems engineering, or go more towards business and acquire those other skills so you can just take care of business and get solutions done. Don't just be like, no, I'm a developer who writes the apps I'm told to. That's a flawed model and always has been.
Absolutely.
So,
I think,
will the software developer still, or probably they're not going to look like a nerdy, geeky guy anymore, maybe. Help our viewers or listeners understand. Nice. That actually gives me a segue into my next question, and it's for both of you. So with the rise of low-code platform, is there still room for software developers in the industry, and what should they look forward to?
Well, I think in the typical enterprise, the old idea that developers make apps and other people consume them is basically dead. Not everyone has realized it, but that's basically dead. Much of business software is the same fungible technical things rearranged into different patterns. Low code already made it much easier for the domain people to do it, and now you can generate things. So the idea that you need a developer to make an app is not a very pragmatic approach. The way they should look at themselves, they can go in one of two directions. If I'm a developer and I'm looking out there, you can go in one of two directions. You either go deeper into technology, right? Inside a typical enterprise, not a software company, that would be like being essentially on their platform team, or, that works either on the most complex projects or actually provides the underlying services and integrations or helps people when they need it, when they need something technical or whatever. So you go more purely into technology and you get deeper. You don't just stay where you're at, because we're not going to use you to write the app anymore. That's a lot easier to do. Or and obviously, you could also work at a technology company and work on underlying technology. That's another path. Or you go the other direction, you become much more multidisciplinary. So this has been observed in the technology world already. This isn't theory at all. I saw even recently a product leader at a tech company talked about the collapse of the talent stack in their own company, where the designers are coding and the coders are doing design and they're deploying, and it's because AI can generate stuff, right? So, and that's been going on in low code for a while, but now AI is just like gasoline on top. So what that basically means is, if you saw yourself as, I'm a Java specialist, and yeah, maybe I do a few other things, but that's really my core value proposition in life, that shouldn't be your core value proposition. Your core value proposition should be to learn the other parts of software and solution delivery and combine them so you can solve problems and provide value. The consultative developer, if you will. And those people could come from business or IT, but if you're a technologist, again, either get way deeper in the technology as a true engineer working on underlying systems engineering, or go more towards business and acquire those other skills so you can just take care of business and get solutions done. Don't just be like, no, I'm a developer who writes the apps I'm told to. That's a flawed model and always has been.
Absolutely.
So,
I think,
will the software developer still, or probably they're not going to look like a nerdy, geeky guy anymore, maybe?
I think the only advice that I would have is, communication skills is something which typically software engineering programs have not been focusing on. That's the only thing that I would say, because if you decide to go into the multidisciplinary approach, there would be a lot of different skill set people that you'll be talking to, right? And you would be building applications together. So having those set of communication skills, being able to talk the language of business, being able to talk the language of maybe DevOps or the cloud guys, and being able to collaborate to deliver an end application is, I think that's an essential skill that I would say you need to get into your repertoire.
Okay, so John, I was reading a blog of interesting stuff that you've written, and one thing that has come out very clear is your build versus buy thing. You've brought this out very interestingly. Maybe a little bit on that?
Sure. So we've been we've been researching build versus buy and the impact of platforms and low code on that for several years now. And we wrote some, I think, pretty forward-looking research on it several years ago. But basically, the thinking goes like this. Build versus buy, the typical enterprise approach to that question on software, is backwards and wrong. Because historically, the shift towards buying applications as kind of the first order of business was always a compromise, right? You go back to the 90s and everything was custom from scratch, and that was very, very hard and very, very technical. And then we got into these big suites, right, that we bought, and we tried to buy into this definition of how all the business should run from these big companies. We deployed them on premises, and then we customized them at the source code level, and you can never accept updates, and that was very, very hard and expensive. And then we said, you know what? We're going to do SaaS apps. We're going to buy a new SaaS app for every process and every department and every horizontal thing, and then those vendors will innovate on our behalf, right? And we can just have them on subscription. We'll always accept updates, and it'll be great. And that's basically been the generic philosophy to this point. The problem is, to be digital always requires custom, so we still try to customize those SaaS apps, and they're still all independent vendors and independent contracts, and they have varying degrees of customizability with their own analyst ecosystems and da-da-da-da-da. So you end up with all these bleeding chunks of software all over the business, and the real work of the company is often done, I hate to say this, but still in paper and spreadsheets, because you haven't actually instituted a true digital business model. So, enter low code. Low code is an older idea, but it really, in the last 10, 15 years is when it really matured because of the cloud, because of SaaS business models, so some of the same things that enabled SaaS apps, and now because the models they've really matured, right? So, there's really a standard set of components that goes into most pieces of business software. You get those components in the typical low-code platform. They're put together in a very fast, very opinionated, very democratized way. And then all the hosting and deployment is in the box too. So the net of that is, in the last decade or so, we've gotten to the point where very often, even for large enterprise use cases, it is better and faster and cheaper to roll a bespoke application than to go out to the market and buy a SaaS app off the shelf, right? That traditional view that I'll get excellence this way and this will be the cheapest and easiest path is buying an app, it's just not true. There are many examples where they go out to the market and they're like, this app will cost us, X millions of dollars to buy, and it's the main thing, and they can implement a low-code solution for a tiny fraction of the cost, which is a higher quality solution and absolutely fit the purpose of what they need, and they can even implement it in a democratized way. So what's happened then, as low-code has grown and citizen development has grown, and the developer pool has grown, and the understanding of technology has grown, is companies just started building more bespoke apps, whether they thought about it or not, right? So even though they thought of themselves as buy-first shops, they would just start making more custom apps because they could, and the muscle was growing and people knew what it was, and they would view every app opportunity through the economics of, why would I pay for that? That's just these tables and these screens and this process. Why would I go buy this thing, right? So companies were telling us, we are buying fewer apps and hiring fewer consultants as our low-code program grows. And we've been beating on this drum for years because it really is a really good thing to do. And when you consolidate on a platform, you have easier integration, you have easier administration, you have easier governance, you have consistent experience, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now with AI, that trend has become conscious. We were writing about it like this shift is happening. The economics are totally different. Why do we buy things all the time, right? Like everything has to be custom to some degree in enterprise and da-da-da-da. Now with AI, because everyone is freaked out about it, and everyone's seen code generation and AI being applied across all the steps, like we said, we've talked to a number of firms in the last 12 months that have told us outright, any new piece of software, we start with this low-code platform. That's their starting point, right? That is assumed to be the starting point. See if you can do it there. Any new piece of software, we assume bespoke is going to be done, so we can leverage our licenses, et cetera. And I know for a fact that there are a number of strategies in the works around portfolio consolidation around that idea. So modernization of old code and cutting off chunks of the SaaS portfolio and going, how can we migrate using AI or whatever, all these things onto a common platform and push the administration and ongoing improvement of them out to the business and that kind of thing. So my basic view is This idea that you always go buy an app for every little thing is wrong. The ratio of build versus buy is basically backwards. It's not that you'll never buy anything ever again, but you'll buy for real differentiated technology, not all the same like fungible components rearranged into industry patterns. It's a bad way of looking at it. It'll be platform first, platform consolidation first, democratized implementation on these low-code platforms with AI generating things. That's the new economics.
Wow, it's phenomenal to hear you on the subject.
Thank you.
Well, John, you've touched on the subject, but then there is a very, very pointed question from one of our employees, and it was like, how do you see governance shaping around low-code?
So I alluded already to the idea that the developers would have to move more towards technology, and I said something about platform teams. So the way an IT organization should look at governance is, it isn't our job to build apps. It's our job primarily to enable other people to build apps, or at least to build most apps, right? So then the art of governance becomes, how, as this grows, so more and more people develop and more things are made and more things change dynamically and so on, how do we pragmatically manage risks? That's really it. So you need kind of a distributed organization, right? That's one thing, and you ferment your early adopters and decentralize and all that. There's the organizational side of it, which helps you do it. But in terms of the philosophy, you have to look at the whole body of applications, which is going to be hundreds or thousands, as, okay, how do we manage the outsized risks and let the other ones go? Typically, the way companies do that is they apply kind of risk profile rules to the applications people are building. So a very common approach is there's 3 zones. There's the green zone, build what you want, right? You know, if it's messed up, it's not going to burn the place down. We're not going to go to jail. It's fine. There's like the yellow zone, which is you can build it, citizen developer, but some more applies. Maybe someone has to do a code review before you deploy it or whatever. And then there's the red zone, which is maybe you can work on the team, but it should be a centrally owned thing. It's used globally or whatever, right? So Susie supervisor probably shouldn't be the one owning it and making it. And then you got to figure out how to automate those rules, because you don't want to introduce friction and say, well, every time you want to build something, you have to ask me permission. I'm going to put it on a list and give you an approval, and then you have to go through the whole SDLC, which we already talked about compressing, right? You have to, through the metadata, right, because there should be metadata of the thing you're building, infer the risk characteristics of the application, and then either allow them to continue or stop them, either at design time or deploy time or even in runtime, as the characteristics or usage characteristics of the app changes. And then I will add, there's a last mile of this, because everything I just said is totally possible. Whether it's through the platform configurations or it's additional automations you write on top of it, it's totally doable. There's a lot of like experiential frameworks out there that have been done on it. There's this last mile though of judgment, where it's like, what's the business risk of the thing the person is making? And that is the perfect target for AI. That's the perfect target for AI, where there's things that you can't infer directly from technical characteristics. And that's where you should be pointing in governance. Gen AI, again, in sort of the SDLC context, is this app a house or a mouse? If it messes up, is somebody going to die or not? Whatever, those kinds of things. And I will give you a specific, concrete example of this. I interviewed an insurance company where they have a citizen developer program as such. And 1/3 of all the apps in their company are written on a single platform, custom by these citizen developers. And it's a big insurance company, right? So you think of insurance as conservative, they've got a lot going on. Their risk threshold, because insurance knows risk, their risk threshold to say, for a given application, we want more IT-style management of it for rolling it out, is a certain financial number, okay? So if this app goes down or breaks, this single app, if it loses us more than this many dollars per year, then we're going to manage it the IT style. Would you like to guess what the financial risk threshold is for a single app in that company?
Maybe a few $1,000s?
$50 million.
Ooh.
Oh, wow.
Now that's a big number. That was the biggest number I'd heard in my research. But remember, insurance is deeply rational, right? Like they're in the business of deciding where to put money and how to manage risks. So I think for them it was probably well thought out. The point is, that should not be like a checklist that somebody goes through, right? And you don't want to introduce lots of friction all the time either. That is the perfect example of something where you could point a model at what people are building, the metadata and other things like the data inside or how it's being used or whatever, to say, that looks like it's got some regulatory stuff in it, and if it got messed up, it would cost us $50 million, right? Yeah, that's how you want to look at it. You want to eliminate friction and automate things and automate those judgment calls as much as possible. So that's kind of how I explain it to people. It's pragmatic risk management scale to manage the digitization of everything.
Great.
Nice. Well, Varun, what do you see the trust impact of Gen AI in low code?
I think that's been one of the biggest concern areas around AI and generative AI, saying that, how can how can I trust the decision that an AI agent makes? And I think what we have done around is we've built the Newgen One Trusted AI framework, and there are 4 core pillars to this Trusted AI framework. So there's the trusted deployment. So what that says is that you decide that for this particular kind of model or application, you want it on-prem, you want it private cloud, you want it public cloud. Then there is the trusted data, which is very, very important, because we are talking about data which is the organization's own data, which is being used to take decisions, right? So that's very important. Then we're talking about trusted models. So whatever data the model is working on, if you're training that model, you find something not working out, you can very quickly change the model. You can use a different model or tweak the parameters of that model. And then finally is the trusted decisioning. So any decision that the AI model makes gets audited, right? Including all the prompts that were given, all the output that was given, everything gets audited. So at the end of the day, 2 years down the line, let's say you want to find out why did the AI agent build the application a certain way? Why did it, specify that this particular application should be approved or this should be rejected? All of that data is there within the application. It's stored as part of the audit trail, so you can at any point of time go back and see why the decision was taken, right? So I think that trusted AI framework gives a lot of confidence to our customers in rolling out, building and rolling out AI agents on top of our platform.
It's all about commitment to AI's or ethical AI practices.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Nice, interesting. Well, we are towards the tail end of the podcast, and as we wrap up, so John, I would like to know what's your advice for enterprises moving forward based on your research and expertise?
Get a low-code platform. If you don't have one already, I don't mean just have one, use it strategically. Establish a proactive citizen developer program. Low-code isn't just for citizen developers, but you have to get that audience in. By proactive, I mean a team with a little bit of money at least that needs to go out and grow it and evangelize it and get people involved. Use citizen development as the engine to scale your AI experimentation like we talked about, because that's where you'll get the ROI back, is with all those experiments. And then start systematically prioritizing a bespoke approach to software on the platform over always buying apps. Because the reality is the cost and risk and lead time of custom development has dropped so dramatically that it's often better and faster and cheaper to roll a fit-to-purpose solution on low code. And now it can generate stuff for you so you can get past that blank canvas problem. That's what I do.
Okay. Varun, any closing thoughts?
No, I think I absolutely agree with John over here. That's saying that, get that practice in the organization. And look for a tool which can solve different types of problems, right? And with app gen platforms now in place, I think rolling out or automating across multiple horizontal applications has never been easier.
Well, thank you so much, John. Thank you, Varun.
You're welcome.
And thank you to our listeners for tuning in, and stay tuned for more conversations to flow in. Thank you.